You might be wondering, what is Model United Nations?
Well, in this video, we're going to explain to you what Model United Nations is.
So what is Model UN? Model UN is when students get to step into the shoes of world leaders to discuss and solve global problems.
The first stage of a Model United Nations simulation is research. This is when students research their assigned topic, country, and committee.
The second stage is debate. This is when students get to speak about the perspective of their country and influence what other people think.
The third stage is negotiation. This is when students get up to meet with one another and form a group of countries that we call a bloc. And that bloc is going to work together to determine what their solutions are to their assigned topic.
The fourth stage is resolutions and resolution writing. This is when the bloc works together to create a document that outlines the problems and solutions they have to address the global issue their committee is discussing.
And the fifth stage is action. This is when the committee goes through each resolution and votes on them to determine which resolutions the United Nations will adopt and implement.
And that's it. That's Model United Nations. If you want to check out more resources on how to participate in Model UN, check out the tips and articles on bestdelegate.com.
And if you really want to work on your MUN skills in research, public speaking, negotiation, and leadership, check out the MUN Institute.
– 2020 was a year that tested us in ways that we've never been tested before. It was also the United Nations 75th anniversary, and to mark the occasion we sent out an invitation to the world. Tell us your hopes and fears, we said, and tell us how we can work better to get towards the world we all want. Over 1.5 million of you replied, from every single country in the world. And regardless of where we live, or the pressures and challenges we face, no matter how rich or poor, woman or man, your messages confirmed what we have long held to be true, that there is much more that unites us than divides us. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the need for better access to basic services. 500,000 called for better access to healthcare services, with 300,000 more urging better access to education. Across the world, you spoke of great concerns about levels of poverty, inequality and conflict. Many of you worry about risks arising from new technologies. And you demanded greater respect for human rights and more employment opportunities. Climate change and the destruction of our natural environment was the greatest concern of all. But there is hope, and it lies with youth. More than half of the people who responded were young people. And with more investment in youth and greater opportunities to work together and across boundaries, we can build a more sustainable world for all. 86% of you said that international cooperation is vital in shaping the future we want and need. We gathered your responses and presented them to world leaders at the 75th United Nations General Assembly on September 21st, and they unanimously agreed with you. Now is the time for action. The good news is that we have the tools to achieve the sustainable future we all want and need, and the Sustainable Development Goals are our roadmap to get there. Urgent efforts are required, and that's why, in this, our birthday year, we choose action over celebration.
Hello and assalamu alaikum. Welcome, whoever's joining in today, to our sixth webinar, if I'm taking the count correctly. And today we have a very special one. I would say it's special simply because not for the focus on the committee that it is, which is obviously international press. You know, it's always been about the press for me. Confession. But then again, it's about the individual who's joining us today for this interactive webinar session. Today's topic is rules of procedure of international press in the Model UN simulation. And today we have a very special guest. She herself is special in her own nature. She has been someone who's always been motivating others, whether it's a junior or a senior, and she carries with her enormous level of work ethics. And amongst it all, she is also taking care of herself, her family, her parents, and everyone around. She's the giant teddy bear, none other than Raisa Ashraf, who is set to join with us today, as you all know. So I will get Raisa Ashraf onto the screen right away. So Raisa, whenever you're ready, just say hi to us.
Assalamualaikum bhaiya.
Walaikum assalam. How are you?
I'm doing well, alhamdulillah. I hope you're doing well too.
I am doing very well, and it's good to hear your voice finally. It's been long. The quarantine has forced us to not meet or not socially interact, but that's all aside. This is a great opportunity for us. I think we have a good amount of 45 minutes or more to talk about the things we feel passionate about, and also to socialize at the same time, the power of technology. So first of all, we need an official introduction of the Raisa Ashraf.
I think you would be better at the introduction than I would be, to be honest. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to introduce myself right now.
Yeah, just casually introduce yourself, like who you are, what you're doing, and how you're spending your time these days.
So you basically did give the basic introduction of who I was, but for those who don't know, apart from MUNs, I'm a full-time student right now, and I'm currently doing my undergrads at Prague University, majoring in anthropology. We are actually right in the smack in the middle of our finals right now, so yeah, that's something which I'm working on, apart from everything else. So yeah, that's something. My academics is something which is keeping me busy. Like you said, I am also taking care of my dad along with my mom. So there's that. Yeah. So, and events like these are always a good thing since it helps me de-stress and socialize with friends.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we used to say that Model UN and such extracurricular activities help us detox our daily lives and the toll that we go through. So these are all well and good, and we are also happy to see you smiling. So let's just dive into it. And before we go to the gist of our webinar, it is a webinar, but not such formal or the way we're used to conducting these in a Model UN. So this is just an informal discussion between two people. Let me first give our viewers the introduction of international press. For those who aren't familiar, in a Model UN conference, which is indeed a simulation, role-playing of world leaders and certain entities, organizations, which is simulated in an academic setting for students to learn about the international affairs of the world and other stuff. Amongst that simulation, or a part of the simulation, or you could say an identifier which is needed, which are committees, which are small groups of students who take part, is the international press. It's known in many different names. I like to call it the press, I think Raisa prefers IPC, maybe International Press Correspondence, as far as I've worked with her. We have worked together multiple times, and I was a delegate in a conference where she was an EB. So I knew her from holding great lengths of qualities in model event from before. So it's just international press. A lot of people say IP, IPC, whichever way you say, it's just the press. So today we're going to talk about how this myth, the IP or IPC, is simulated. So let me first ask the first question to Raisa and remind our viewers that you can indeed comment, post your questions if you have any, so that we can pass the question to Raisa and she can answer it for all of us. So first question from me, do we really need the press? And if we do need it in an MUN, why?
First of all, yes, we do need the press. I think for a very long time, even when I started doing the MUN conference initially, there was a lot of, I would go as far as saying that there was a huge amount of ignorance towards the whole idea of press or international press in general, because nobody really understood what it is, even outside the whole structure of a MUN conference or any kind of conference for that matter. Nobody took the time and effort to actually understood what press is and what it entails. Even in our daily lives, I'll be using a little bit of explicit language here, so do not.
Of course, it is an informal setting. You can even use Bengali if that's comfortable for you. We don't mind.
So yeah, apologies for it beforehand, but even in
no need.
Even in our daily lives, আমরা যখন টিভি দেখি, নিউজ দেখি, যখন কোনো ঝামেলামূলক নিউজ টিভিতে আসে, তখনই দেখা যায় যে আমরা সবাই মানে অনেক আজে বাজে কথাবার্তা বলি, গালিগালাজ করি। যারা ইন্টারভিউ দিচ্ছে তাদেরকেও কথা শোনাই, যারা ইন্টারভিউ নিচ্ছে তাদেরকেও কথা শোনাই। So even in our daily lives, there is a certain level of ignorance towards how press works, and basically everything and anything around it. So there's that. আমাদের general day-to-day life থেকে শুরু করে conference শুরু এবং শেষ হওয়া পর্যন্ত ওই ignorance-টা থাকে। So এই ignorance-টা একটু সরানো জরুরি, because press is basically our primary source of what's going on across, basically outside our doors from our homes, especially during a time like this particular COVID pandemic. So it is important to acknowledge how important the role of press is.
Absolutely.
That being said, it is important to identify the amount of work that actually goes behind press in general. Because আমরা হচ্ছে যখন কোনো কনফারেন্স করি, তখন সব ডেলিগেটরা এবং অন্য সব ইবিরা ঠিকই বলে যে, and it's justified to an extent, how normal delegateদেরকে অনেক রিসার্চ করতে হয়, they have to write a lot, they have to speak a lot, backdoor negotiations অনেক হয়, and these are all good and fine and very important. But একটা কমিটির ডেলিগেটকে যতটুকু না রিসার্চ করতে হয়, যতটুকু না কথা বলতে হয়, আই উড সে যে একটা ইন্টারন্যাশনাল প্রেসের করেসপন্ডেন্টকে ওটার অন্তত 10 গুণ বেশি রিসার্চ করার। কারণ ইউ উড নো ভাইয়া যে একটা কনফারেন্সে যদি 5টা কমিটিও থাকে, একটা প্রেসের করেসপন্ডেন্টকে লিটারালি 5টা কমিটিরই টপিক নিয়ে রিসার্চ করা লাগে, এজেন্ডা নিয়ে রিসার্চ করা লাগে। ওখানে প্রত্যেকটা কমিটির যতগুলো রিপ্রেজেন্টেটিভ ডেলিগেটস থাকবে and all the countries that are being represented, প্রত্যেকটা দেশের প্রত্যেকটা কমিটির ফরেন পলিসি নিয়ে পড়াশোনা করে আসতে হয়। I have had to do even as an EB.
Right.
যে আমি একটা ইবি হয়ে প্রত্যেকটা কমিটির এজেন্ডা নিয়ে পড়াশোনা করতে হয়েছে, and I have had to do a shit ton of research. Again, apologies for my language here. So I don't think many people realize that, and I have had professional work experience in the press sector while I've worked for the Daily Star. So even then I know that I've had to do a ton of research, and not many people see the background work that goes behind even a single article that gets published. So yeah, there's that.
True that. Like you mentioned that not just the correspondent to আছে, they're going for the awards. এটা ছাড়াও you have the dias member, তাদেরও মানে double triple load of research করতে হয়. If there's like a committee has 3 agendas, just per se like the advanced ones in the conference, so there's more agendas that you need to research. একটা ক্রাইসিস হলে তখন তো প্রেসের মাথা উপরে আরো প্রেসার পড়ে যায়, কারণ যেভাবে ডেলিগেটরা রিসার্চ they are thinking it just for their countries, but in a press the correspondents have to think about any and every country present, plus the other stuff, the history and things that happen. So আমরা comments পাচ্ছি কিছু, and I am intrigued to take this comment coming from Raisa Ashraf. How can delegates new to MUNs prepare for an IP role? Very interesting question. It was supposed to be one of my questions, so kudos to Raisa for actually picking that question. So Raisa, your thoughts?
The person who asked the question is actually my elder sister. She's super excited whenever I'm participating in anything MUN related. So basically, and this is something which I remember saying to my sister as well when she was actually doing a course during her master's where she had to represent, I think, France in a negotiation simulation that they were doing in one of their courses. So I remember telling her that in cases like that, she has to study the foreign policy first thing. That's the first thing that she has to do. That look into the foreign policy with all the P5 countries, all the history that the country has in relationship to the topic or agenda that they'll be covering. Then basically all the countries that will be present in the committee is important. And amongst the countries present, who are your allies, who are not your allies? You have to figure that out. And especially if and all ended up telling my sister, correspondent, before jump into the conference itself. So they add IP delegates to prepare just as much.
I think we're having a little bit of technical issue with Raisa, but
normal delegate allies.
I think we're having a little bit of technical issues. We are having a little issue hearing you, but you're back now. Like I think it's the issue of the internet, but it's good now. You can continue. There was a glitch.
So আমি যে মাত্র একটা ডেলিগেট বা একটা কান্ট্রির যে রিসার্চ স্ট্রাকচারটা বললাম, an IP delegate, even regardless of whether a new delegate or an old delegate, that one IP delegate has to do the same amount of research, but for
Even more.
all the countries that's going to be present.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
the
Absolutely. Fair
in
point.
the committee and in the yeah.
Yep. So one interesting point that you mentioned as an answer to this question, that is regardless of if you are a new delegate or not, which is something we forget at times. আসলে অনেক কিছু ডিপেন্ড করে অর্গানাইজারদের উপর। এমিউন যারা অর্গানাইজ করছে, ইফ দে ডোন্ট নো দিস ফ্যাক্ট, তারা কি করবে? নিউ খামারদেরকে দে আর গোনা put in Security Council or other flagship committees or in international press. But to my experience, some of the national conferences, they consider IP as an advanced committee. For example, Chittagong University, they have done 6 conferences till date. Yeah, I think 6. So among all of those 6, one of their advanced committees used to be international press, এবং তারা যারা হচ্ছে মিনিমাম 3 থেকে 4টা এমিউন আগে করে এসেছে or prior IP experience আছে, শুধু তাদেরকেই international press they would allocate. So these are things that we don't know. These are things we do not consider at times, but absolutely on point. Fair play. Thank you for that enlightening answer. আমার মনে হয় যে আসলে if you want to focus on international press, you should at least be able to understand the other committee and how the entire conference is structured. এটা খুবই important, but we can discuss this in detail later on. Let's jump to our second question. My second question to you is, in conventional committees, আমি যদি UNGA, DISEC, ECOFIN, SOCHAM, SPECPOL, ADBUD, legal, যে কোনো একটা 6টা কমিটির অথবা আদার ইউএন বডির কমিটি, ইউনিসেফ, HRC, HCR, ইউনেস্কো, যে কোনো একটা ডেলিগেট হয়ে আমাকে একটা কান্ট্রি অ্যাসাইন করা হয়, আমার ডেলিভারেবলস অথবা আমার সাবমিশনটা হতে পারে নাম্বার 1 পজিশন পেপার, and then if I'm being part of a block যারা হচ্ছে সাবমিশন করার জন্য রেজলিউশন তৈরি করছে, একটা ওয়ার্কিং পেপার, অর যেটা হচ্ছে পরবর্তীতে ড্রাফট রেজলিউশন হবে। সো আমার লিটারালি 2টা রিকোয়ারমেন্ট আছে সাবমিশন করার। So my question to you is, IP তে কি ব্যাপারটা সেম অর ডিফারেন্ট? আর যদি ডিফারেন্ট হয় তাহলে কি রকম?
সাবমিশন IP তে সাবমিশনস, আপনি যে সাবমিশনস এর কথা বলছেন, there are a lot of technical issues that is considered, at least in my case. I'm not sure about others, but I'm sure you've seen me work, so you know what I'm referring to. যে আমি যখন কোনো কনফারেন্সে ইবি হিসাবে ঢুকি as a part of the executive board member, so ওখানে হচ্ছে আমি ডেলিগেটসদেরকে I try my best যে শুরুতে থেকে বলে দিই যে when it comes to the writing part, along with taking part in the committee sessions as well, there are a lot of technical issues that they need to consider and constantly remember. When it comes to writing, the formatting is important, because whatever they write goes into what eventually turns out to be the newsletter for the conference. So ওরা কিভাবে প্রেজেন্ট করছে ওদের রাইটিংটা, that's the first thing that catches my eye. So their formattingটা is usually extremely important. ওটার পরে of course what they write is again it's usually a complete different conversation. It usually leads to a multiple hour-long conversation that you or I end up having with the delegates. So and of course on top of that, they are asked to showcase their skills as a member of press via multiple types of writing and video content that they are asked to submit.
What you're saying, sorry to interrupt, what you're saying is that in conventional committee you only write and submit, that's it. But in press, it doesn't restrict to the fact that you need to write and submit. There are many different ways you have to submit, and these are in some ways mandatory, right?
Yes, they are. they're absolutely mandatory because we are not dealing with, especially now during the pandemic. Now that we are in a time where we are heavily dependent on technology, I expect them to fully use whatever that's available to them. If they're working just on their cell phone, I expect them to fully use their cell phone to the fullest and make sure that they're putting in as much of effort as possible.
তার মানে
If
soft
they
skills is also necessary.
Yes. So, and when you say soft skill, not just technological soft skill. I expect the IP correspondents to be just as diplomatic in their approach to the delegates or the executive members or even the organizers. If they are approaching a organizer, I expect them to be just as diplomatic as anyone else in the conference. And again, this is another point which many delegates or correspondents or even organizer or executive board member do not realize, that it is just as important for an press correspondent to practice developing their diplomatic skills, because if I am going to approach you or anyone else in a conference for a piece of information, I'd want to extract that information without letting go of any of my own opinions or biases or information that I already may have. I'm not sure how many people would understand that, but this in itself is a huge skill to have, even in your professional life. Being able to extract the information without making sure, without letting yourself be vulnerable to, if I can put it that way.
Mission Impossible 5.
Yeah.
Right. Great answer. So indeed, মানে I think আমাদের দুজনের experience and the way we have experienced international press, I think we both agree যে like other committees, একটা formal webinar or training session for rules of procedure, it is quite expensive. Or in a small setting, it's not justified. তার মানে আজকে আমরা just we're going to talk about some key elements. তার মানে আমরা পুরো আরোপিটা we cannot discuss in such a short notice. Plus there are many different things, many different aspects are involved. For example, in our very last webinar, we had Golam Samin Rahman, and he mentioned that it takes multiple sessions to actually go through the ROP of Security Council. I think in IP it's the same case, but the problem is that in Security Council or in other committees, as you progress, you can let the delegates know about the ROP. তার মানে আজকে the debate শুরু হলো. As you move closer to the end, you can talk about the other stuff, technical stuff like draft resolution amendment. But in IP, সবকিছু আগেই বলতে হবে, right? মানে একদম from the moment you send them to the committee session. Can you add something to that? How important it is?
Basically, I think you did mention the important parts, but yeah, মানে IP তে যেটা হয় যে you literally from the get-go you have to hit the ground running. That's the best way that I can put it. আমার ক্ষেত্রে যেটা হয়েছে, আমি অনেক সময় ডেলিগেট হিসেবে যখনই কোনো কনফারেন্সে গিয়েছি, especially in the international ones that I've done, আমার ইবিরা যেটা করেছেন, তারা কনফারেন্স যেদিন শুরু হবে, opening ceremonyটার সময় we would literally be taken away, or যেদিন শুরু হবে তার ঠিক আগের দিন we would be given the extensive training from our EBs so that we are aware of what is to come. কারণ অনেক সময় দেখা যায় যে a lot of the EBs, and this is something which I have done as well, many of the IPEBs expect you to cover the opening sessions and ceremonies as well. I know I've done this before. I know that you have done the same at times as well. So usually, এখানে হচ্ছে একটু or it's important to have the communication between EBs and the delegates as well, because যখন আমরা হচ্ছে ওই ট্রেনিং সেশন বা ওপি সেশন ট্রেনিং গুলা শুরুর থেকে বা কনফারেন্সের আগের দিকে করে ফেলতে পারলে it becomes extremely easy, not only on the EBs but also on the press correspondence and delegates to basically deal with everything else, because that way they know what to expect, and they don't have to worry about what they need to do, whether they have all the resources or not, and all the additional things that they have to worry about during the conference. যদি এগুলো একটু আগে আগে আমরা
Absolutely. We're getting some questions and comments from folks who are joining in. একটা খুব interesting, tricky question এসেছে from Raisa Ashraf ID, which I want to address a bit later. It's a very technical question. It's part of our discussion. But one thing you have touched bases, and I want to put some emphasis on that, is the fact that একটা successful simulation of international press, let alone the conference, just IP simulation করতে হলে organizer needs to come forward and give the full support to the EB members. কারণ a lot of the things you've mentioned does happen pre-conference. আমি নিজে এমন MUN গিয়েছি where I had to fill up like a separate form. When I chose IP, they emailed me like a separate form, which gave my dias members an idea আমার কি writing খুব ভালো নাকি আমি আসলে খুব I'm like more like a presenter, or I'm someone who can take great notes, or I can take good snaps, or capture the moments like short clips, 45 seconds or a minute. These are critical, right? So there are many different things involved. Then there is editors, there is cartoonists, there is columnists. We have like many different roles. So do you think, so this is my question, সবকিছু in a nutshell, do you think it's too complicated to be in an international press simulation?
If you don't mind me re-clarifying.
Be honest. So no problem. Yeah.
You basically want to know whether IP in itself is too complicated or not?
Your personal opinion in it. What do you think? Do you find it too complicated, or it's just all right?
I personally have known correspondents and delegates who thought that IP was way too complicated, even more so than the Security Council. I have heard people say that in front of me. But being the person that I am, I always thought that there does come a lot of stress with the committee in general, because that's how all of it is structured. But it is also, I believe that also a very fun committee to be in, because you get to learn a lot in the process. At least আমার ক্ষেত্রে যেটা হয়েছে যে it gave me a lot of life skills in general, because I was able to I'm not sure how much this is applicable for you, but I was able to think on the go. আমি একদম লিটারালি সেকেন্ডসের মধ্যে I had to decide, okay, আমি এটা করতে পারছি না, সো এটা অল্টারনেটিভলি আমি কি করতে পারি। আমি as a EB, আমার এই ঝামেলা হচ্ছে someone might not have access to certain things. How do they submit their work to me? If they, especially if there are issues with the internet and we are so dependent on it, যে anything without it becomes almost impossible for the IP. So basically it has taught me to think fast, quickly and efficiently and work at the same pace. So that's something which I believe is a skill that it's always important for anyone to have. And for that alone, I believe that IP is a great committee for anyone to be in if you want to basically improve on those particular skills. So for that and that alone, I don't think that IP is unnecessarily complicated, because it does teach you a lot. But if you're someone who does not enjoy being literally thrown into the lion's cage so
Yep.
suddenly, I would say that it would be better for you to take things slow and start in other committees instead of IP, um, because yeah, it can be quite overwhelming. But
True.
at the end of the day, I will not want it to be. Um, I will want it to continue being a part of conferences. First of all,
Yep.
I expect people to give the press the respect that it's due, because like we talked about earlier, that a lot of people are ignorant towards it.
Yep.
So I expect people to give its due whenever it's necessary, and um, at least some point in their lives, I want people to experience what it means to be a correspondent, so that
Yep.
in the future, wherever they go in life, they at least know how to appreciate the art of journalism or writing or anything related to the press. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I hear that a lot of the times as well. মানে কথা হচ্ছে আমি একবার আইপি করব. It doesn't happen actually, but very few people have the opportunity to experience that. Anyways, we have a lot of comments. আমি একটু comments গুলো পড়ে আসি.
Sure.
Reminding those who are commenting from my own Facebook profile, please give StreamYard the permission. Otherwise, we won't be able to show your comments or display your comments on the stream. So Rifa Tamanna says Raisa Apu with a heart glowing. Ataur Rahman
Yeah.
Apurbo, best wishes Raisa Ashraf. Nusrat Tabassum Novera Bhai, এত কিছু কোনো announcement পাই না কেন? Go girl, Raisa Ashraf with a heart. Tashrif all the way from Australia, Raisa Ashraf, and a lot of emojis. I cannot translate the emojis, but anyways, let's also focus on some other comments that we're getting. Raya previously commented, excited to listen in today. Saleh says impressive. Shamaimla Majid says wow, thank you. Galib Akhan says Raisa Apu with a heart sign. Samin agrees, yes, everything depends on the allocation, really need to be considered about that. True that. Meftahul Jannat, wow. Okay. And finally, we have the question that we're waiting on. So Sarfaraz Ashraf ID, উনি অনেকক্ষণ ধরে কোয়েশ্চেনটা করেছেন and he's been waiting for a response from us. So the question is, it's a very interesting topic for both of us, and I think we both can put some thought into it, but I'll ask Raisa the question first. Is only Reuters allowed to cover the formal session in UNSC, or other news agencies can join in too? In some cases, what Sarfaraz writes further, that he has seen that EBs in UNSC doesn't allow other news agencies to enter the committee room. How does this work?
This is actually a very fun thing for even me to cover, to be honest, because if anyone follows the actual general assemblies or the sessions that happens in different UN committee organizations in the headquarters in New York.
Yep.
What usually happens is just Security Council jodi even if press members are allowed to oversee the committee sessions, press থেকে Reuters বাদে আর কাউকে কথা বলতে দেওয়া হয় না. Even if it's when it comes to normal questions or points of information, any even general questions and answers করতে গেলে Reuters বাদে কাউকে allow করা হয় না, even if they are allowed to sit in and see how things are going. So officially, yes, only Reuters is allowed to cover the and basically participate in general. They're the only ones who have the authority to actively take part in the sessions. In conferences, especially in South Asia, it is whether only Reuters is allowed or not. It's very subjective to the conference and the EBs that are overseeing Security Council in general. Samin Rahman, last session, when he you had a session with Samin. I've been in multiple conferences with him. So when he is overseeing Security Council, for example, I personally know that even if he allows press members of different organizations, he does not allow anyone to comment except Reuters. And I know other people, there are other EBs who've overseen Security Council as well, who may or may not allow Reuters, other organizations with Reuters, but তারা হচ্ছে Reuters কে সাধারণত prefer করে when it comes to actively taking part in the committee sessions. Of course, there have always been cases where the EBs of Security Council have allowed the other press members to participate, and and that's usually on the basis of the fact that they either want the press members to learn and to challenge their own delegates, or they're just too ignorant and don't know that only Reuters would be allowed to talk. So it's usually either or. So but formally it's just only basically on formal cases only Reuters would be given the authority to talk and actively participate.
True that. Some of the stuff that you mentioned are very key to understanding this dynamics. আমরা প্রথম থেকে বলছি অর্গানাইজারদের কথা, আমরা প্রথম থেকে বলছি আরোপি নিয়ে যখন কথা বলছি অথবা ইন্টারন্যাশনাল প্রেস নিয়ে যখন আমরা কথা বলছি যে there needs to be an understanding. So understandingটা হচ্ছে, as I've also encountered, যে if I am part of the diaspora IT, I need to also understand the other EB members, especially the chairs or the ones who are presiding the debates in individual committees. It's all about timing to me. Maybe there is a discussion going on and they do not want to be disturbed. It could be a case. But other than that, they would allow it. Perhaps for that timing, they said no. Perhaps there's a crisis going on where they don't want any other interference. It could be many different things. Even in real life, if you consider, there can be the presence of other news agencies. But the problem is, when you're in the Security Council, to answer this question that Raisa Ashraf asked, if there is another press member or agency, news agency, and there is something which cannot be verified in the room, that's just waste of time. So the issue is that you only take Reuters as credible. You take only the information from Reuters as a source of verified information. So it's just not worth anybody's time having other people. It's basically like programming, null and void. So let's just move on. In this point of the webinar, we'll take a short break. We'll have some promo video by UN75, and we'll be coming back right after 2 to 3 minutes time, or maybe 4. So stay tuned with us and please post your question. Thank you, Shorfaraz. Thank you, Raya, for the question. These are very interactive. So let's enjoy this short video by the UN75 movement. Thank you.
Young people are seeing their future prospects dwindle. How should we respond? The best way is to ask them what they think.
We want to live in a world that provides everyone an equal chance to develop their potential, regardless of who they are.
We want you to work together in the spirit of multilateralism to guarantee a future where young people can fully attain their potential.
I am pleased that the UN set out to listen to the hopes and fears of the global public.
We demand greater urgency to swiftly resolve our world's greatest challenges. It's time for us to act and work together.
The ideals of the United Nations, peace, justice, equality, and dignity are beacons to a better world.
Multilateralism is not an option, but a necessity, as we build back better and greener for a more equal, more resilient, and more sustainable world.
United Nations is undoubtedly the greatest institution created by humanity.
Now is most importantly the time for us to come together as truly united nations.
The UN has tremendous convening power. It exposes the challenges we face and lays out solutions to them.
We will fail the future if we cannot remember the lessons of the past.
Every nation, large and small, stands a better chance at our best future by acting in solidarity.
To achieve our common goals, we must recognize once again that no state, no matter how powerful, can meet the challenges of climate change, growing inequality, and violent conflict, and now the pandemic, alone.
We can, and all together will succeed.
العمل متعدد الأطراف بات أكثر ضرورة الآن مع تفاقم التحديات التي تعصف بعالمنا الواحد.
We must do everything we can to fulfill our obligations to the peoples of this world.
The UN we need is one that will inspire citizens, create trust, and bring effective leadership.
Our lived experience tells us about the importance of defending and strengthening the UN.
La prevención de los conflictos, en especial los conflictos armados, es la razón de ser de las Naciones Unidas.
Without comprehensive reforms, the UN faces a crisis of confidence.
The future we want. Let us build it together.
No country is an island, but that we are all interconnected.
The United Nations remains our best prospect for peace.
The United Nations is more indispensable today than ever before.
Mundo de paz e concórdia através de concertação multilateral.
Governments alone cannot stand up to the global challenges we face.
Doch wer meint, allein besser zurechtzukommen, der irrt. Unser Wohlergehen ist ein geteiltes und unser Leid auch. Wir sind eine Welt.
Our world is facing unprecedented challenges. For the United Nations 75th anniversary, we set out to ask the world, what are your hopes for your future? The United Nations listened, and the world spoke. The world is not as divided as we thought.
Hello everyone. So just a reminder, this series of webinars are hosted by a foundation, and I, Ahmed Kabisharan, myself is supporting them as the academic advisor, and our theme for the webinars and the focus and the work that we're putting together along with our guests is dedicated to the UN 75 movement by the United Nations. So with that note, we resume to our webinar. I think আমরা আজকে অনেক কিছু কভার করে ফেলেছি in such a short notice, and I'm still experiencing comments coming up. Again, যদি কোনো question থাকে, please post it in whichever destination you're joining us from. We have 3 places we're streaming live right now. from a foundation page. We're also streaming from my own Facebook profile and also my YouTube channel. Okay, my next question is about the research methodology. একটু যদি if you give us an idea যে আচ্ছা আমি someone very new and I know how to research, but আমার MUN research or international press research, according to you, are they different? And if they are different, how should I approach? So, Raisa.
I would say that at the MUN, whether we are part of MUN as a delegate or a correspondent, I believe that of course it does not have to be perfect, but researching it does help you guide your research skills towards a more polished, professional, how should I put it? It guides you towards a rather more polished way of researching. আমি যখন research করা যখন MUN করা শুরু করলাম, I was studying in Asian University for Women in Chittagong. So I was, I think, a third year student. I just finished my second year and I got into my third year when I started doing MUNs for the first time. And and because I started with IP itself, it pushed me into doing extremely in-depth, professional level research work. And anyone who's in university or have been at university at any point in their life would know যে ইউনিভার্সিটির যে কোনো কোর্সের পেপার লিখতে গেলে আমাদেরকে অনেক একদম in-depth research করা লাগে just to make sure that our paper is submittable or at least presentable in front of our instructors. And what MUNs did was, because I had to do such in-depth research, even for the smallest of details, it actually helped me academically extremely. I don't even have the proper terms to explain it, but yeah, it did. Basically, all the research skills that I was able to gain from my delegating or correspondent experiences, it basically helped make all my academic endeavors make more sense to me. Because when we যখন হাই স্কুল থেকে আমরা যখন ইউনিভার্সিটিতে যাই, it's usually a huge leap for many of us, and usually researcher procedure on what is acceptable as a resource and what is not acceptable as a resource, these things do not make sense on the get-go for many of us. And যখন আমি MUNs করা শুরু করলাম, and I've seen the same for many other people see it. I've seen many of my own delegates have a similar experience. যে ওরা যখন, when I started helping them out with their research process, academically a lot of the things that they were already doing started making sense. অথবা they would come up to me and say যে আপু আপনি যে এভাবে বুঝালেন, আমি যে ইউনিভার্সিটিতেও যে এরকম কাজ করছি, প্রফেসররা কিছু ঠিক মতন বুঝাতে পারে না, কিন্তু এখানে প্র্যাকটিস করে করে it's starting to make sense. And I think the same applied to me as well, কারণ অনেক সময় দেখা যায় যে we have to do a lot of courses or a lot of assignments which are mandatory for us academically, but আমাদেরকে ঠিক মতন বুঝানো হয় না বলে আমরা হচ্ছে we fail to understand them properly. And because we get access to these events where people help you to learn all these things, It just helps you, it ends up helping you in cases where you may not even understand. It'll help you eventually. So yeah, I think that was one of the best transferable skill that I've had because of all MUNs in general.
Right.
Yeah. And again, it's also one of the more important ones for many students who often fail to understand why ECAs like MUNs or debates are important in the first place.
Exactly. So we're talking about research methodology, and the last topic that we have is the writing style. So let's focus on the writing style, and how does Raisa Ashraf prefers the writing style of her correspondence. আমাদের কিন্তু একটা অডিয়েন্স কমেন্ট কোয়েশ্চেনও এসেছে, we will address it right after this. So this would be our last formal discussion, and as soon as we are done with it, we'll go to the rapid fire round, and also we'll take the question from the audience. So Raisa, your writing style guide.
আমার ক্ষেত্রে, so in my writing, basically what I look for, but at least in my case, I try and make sure that it's as malleable as possible, basically, because IP te jeta hoy je and you've seen a lot of this formats that I use in my study guides as well. Je I make it a point to mention to my delegates that because they're submitting so many different type of writing to me, they're getting to develop and understand what it means to write different articles, different news bits. So আমার ক্ষেত্রে আমি যখন লিখতে বসি, that comes in handy because I was always, when I was a delegate, especially in international conferences, I've done a couple outside Bangladesh as well. So I was always forced to make sure that my writing is never monotonous. Because the moment my writing became monotonous, I would be subject to losing points and losing out on awards. Of course, awards don't always mean everything. And it shouldn't be the primary goal for anyone to attend these conferences. But of course, for many of us, including myself, it was always a plus point that there was always an incentive for us to do well at events like the MUNs. So I was always in at least international conferences, because I was put in a situation where I absolutely had to make sure that my writing is never monotonous. Even now, when I'm writing just for myself or my academic classes, I am able to move between different types of writing to a certain level, with a certain level of ease. Because I have that prior experience to lean back on. Even in university, I have professors who demand different types of writing for different courses, for different types of assignments. So having that experience where you are expected to change your writing styles from one submission to another literally within seconds often cases. It's always, it helps me lean back on that experience, and and if anyone is to come to me and asks me what is one of the primary takeaways from a conference like an MUN, it's that your writing becomes extremely malleable. You are able to make sure that it changes with time, and and it manages to retain a certain level of quality at the same time. And that's something which is important academically, and even if you go into a career where you are expected to write as to a certain extent. So yeah.
I really like this answer, so thank you so much. We'll just focus on the question that is related to this particular discussion. So Sarfaraz writes again, while writing a report or an article, should a correspondent need to follow the agency policy? Let's just clarify what agency policy is first, Raisa.
Achha. So let's I think a very good example of this would be so I remember in the last conference that I was participating in as a delegate, I remember it's YTA. I'm pretty sure you know what I'm trying to refer to. Basically, I was representing Al Jazeera, which is a Qatar-based news agency. So, and basically, for those who don't know, Al Jazeera is actually a state-owned or news agency, but many of us often mistake it to be a independent international news organization, because to us, many of us who are international audiences of Al Jazeera, it does function that way, because whatever news we get from Al Jazeera, it does work as an international independent news agency. But because it is state-owned by Qatar, all of the news that the residents of Qatar get from Al Jazeera is actually extremely skewed pro Qatar government. So whenever I wrote articles for Al Jazeera or any state-owned or a news agency, I have to make sure that I have that in mind, that if I'm writing for the newsletter, I have to act as a pseudo international independent news agency to make sure that everyone makes us to believe so, or they end up assuming that we are working as an international independent news agency. But whenever sending in news updates, for example, needs to be extremely pro Middle East. It has to be pro government, and it has to be open to everything and anything which the government of Qatar, in this case, decides during the conference. So this is something which I always have to, as a delegate of Al Jazeera, I have had to keep in mind. And this is something which is an essential part of agency policy, if I can put it that way. Because people talk about country policy, but when it comes to representing news agencies, people do struggle understanding how they're supposed to represent their agencies or the country where the agency is based in. I think this makes a bit more sense.
It does, yeah. So how do you suggest your correspondents to write their report, and what should they follow?
Basically, the first thing that I expect them to do is do a background research on the agency themselves. For example, again, Al Jazeera is a very good example in this case. That not many people actually know that it's a state-owned organization or news agency. So when a news agency is state-owned, you have to almost by default assume that there will be some form of biasness, which is being emphasized on by the state which owns the organization in the first place. So that's to be assumed. So, and along with that, earlier during the session, we talked about how we have to, as a correspondent, we have to do research on all the delegates and the countries that are being represented.
Yep.
So, based on that research, all the information that we have on the foreign policy of the state itself, they come into play here as well. Because we, based on our, how should I say it, research on the foreign policy of Qatar, for example, it may or may not have a good relationship with its neighbors. It may or may not have a good relationship with the religious entities of the Middle East. But it may have a good relationship with surprising countries such as Iran or even
similar countries,
America,
which are
or Western countries, for example.
Yep.
So how that affects the country's foreign policies ends up spilling over to the news agency itself as well, and how that functions. So that's something which the correspondence needs to understand.
All right, great advice. Thank you so much. I think we're done with the points that I wanted to cover today, at least. Let's jump to a 5-minute rapid fire question round, and you'll have very little time to think about it. As soon as you can think of an answer, just spill it out loud. And this is going to be focused on you as an individual. These are very straightforward, nothing to be stressed about. So let's just get to it. My first question, let's start with a very simple one. When did you start your MUN career, and which year?
I started in 2016. I started it with a Indian conference called Jodhpur International MUN. It was an independent conference, so nothing too big or nothing too special. But that was my first conference, where I ended up actually winning the second highest award there, Outstanding Correspondent, as it's mentioned in Bangladesh. So yeah, basically I won the equivalent to Outstanding Correspondent.
Nice, congratulations for that. Yeah. So your first time as an EB, which MUN was that?
It was actually a small conference or MUN Chittagong. So there's this organization in Chittagong called Drishti. They're known for organizing. They're basically known for organizing debate competitions for students. A couple of years prior to 2017, they started organizing MUNs for students as well. And in 2017, they were, I think it was their third or fourth installment of the conference, when I got called to be the IP editor-in-chief for that year's installment. Yeah, that was my first EB experience.
Okay, awesome. So let's move forward with questions for rapid fire. So first question, these were just like getting warmed up. So these are the ones. So your favorite executive board member? Excuse me.
I'm going to be extremely diplomatic and say it's you.
It's me?
Yeah.
But you've never been a delegate under me. So that's the criteria. We need a name under whose supervision you've been a delegate, either correspondent or a delegate.
So I've always been a correspondent, never a delegate. So in this case, I have to say that the first conference that I did, Jodhpur, the IP head that I had then, Priyanka Patra, she would have to be my all-time favorite because I always had a soft spot for her since she was my first EB. So yeah, she would be the
All right. And an EB under whose supervision you've worked as an EB in your fellow DIAS member?
You.
Okay. A DIAS member who has worked under you, your fellow DIAS member.
Can we move to the next question?
Of course. Next question is a delegate who really inspired you, a correspondent.
There are too many to choose from, to be honest.
Give us few names. Maybe some of them are listening to this.
A
if
lot
you want
of
to give
people.
some shout outs.
So there are a number of people who I've ended up becoming close to, especially after I left MUNs. You've worked with many of them as well. Novera, Rifa, Mahir. I've ended up being extremely close to all of them on an individual level. So I think just as much as I have ended up probably influencing them, they have influenced me just as much. Yeah.
Right. And an EB who inspires you outside of international press?
Outside of international press, I think the benchmark of EBs would either be Raisa Ashraf or Sami. So either one of the two would have to do with this.
Right. Your most favorable conference or a conference that you remember till today?
So in 2018, the AUW MUN that I did, that conference literally had. I was a co-chair in the IP that year with Imran as my fellow co-chair. So the correspondence that I had or we had happens to be one of the strongest group of IP correspondence that I've personally had till date. And that happens to be one of my favorite IP committees till now as well. So
if I'm not mistaken, there was Tarif, there was Rifa. If I'm not mistaken. Okay, yes, we were there. Right.
Yeah.
Next question would be a country that you would like to role play as delegate, if you ever do that.
Israel.
Wow. Can we ask why?
It's the same reason. I think not many people know that, but the first conference that I did as a correspondent was actually in Historical Security Council in Jodhpur. And being a first time delegate or correspondent and being placed in Historical Security Council and winning an award from there was enriching experience, but also a challenging one. And I think that's what also led to me pushing myself to actually performing well that time. And that's, I think, and I would go for Israel for merely the same reason, because I know that it will push me to perform well. People will have extremely low expectations from it, and I personally enjoy going into a conference as an underdog, and that does give you a lot of scope to make mistakes and learn from it on the go.
Right.
So yeah.
A committee that you love to observe?
Security Council. Any form.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Next question would be, I think I just lost my train of thought. But anyways, Yeah, so you're pretty sharp with the rapid fire round. I thought we would be able to put you a little bit in, you know, less comfortable situation. But anyway, you pretty much aced it. Right. I think I remember my question. So we know at times we have this scavenger hunt. There is an object that is shown in the screen, and you have to go find that object in your house. Imagine we have this scavenger hunt right now between you and myself. Imagine a crest or a trophy, something from MUN that you're going to come and show it to the camera right now. Which one it would be? I can guess it could be the Jodhpur one, since it was one of your memorable MUN experiences. Any other winners?
I think I definitely show the one where I got my first and only Best Dell award. It's unfortunately the only crest which I ended up breaking over the last couple of years, but that would definitely be the one which I'd want to show people.
Done.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. Enough MUN question. Let's ask some question about Raisa's life. So, your favorite food?
I have way too many, but the one thing that I'm thinking about right now is a dosa, a good masala dosa. So that would be one of my favorites.
And your favorite cuisine?
Italian or South Indian?
Okay. I think I only have a few more questions, but let me just go through some comments that you are getting just before we wrap up the webinar. Jahin Nawarhok Esha, Raisa Ashraf Apu Best, Shaikh Orfana Afrin, I think she tagged someone to watch your webinar. Azmain Adil Nakib, Raisa Ashraf Apu with 2 hearts, Lamia Rahman Rosa, amazing. We're getting some comments as well, even though our conversation is pretty much at the end. Last few questions, or let's just say this is the penultimate question of today's webinar. What do you think the quarantine or the global pandemic has taught you the most? And this is for all the viewers. That's it? That's your answer? Patience? Yes. That's all? I was expecting for a longer answer, but anyways, thank you so much for sharing your time. I know you had to find a schedule from your calendar and all of your commitments. So thank you so much. It's been enjoyable. It's been wonderful, and I think on behalf of myself and Raisa and also the organizers from A Foundation, we all thank anyone and everyone who's joining today, whether from YouTube or Facebook. Please ask any comments or question relating to the rules of procedure of IP or anything that is relevant to Raisa Ashraf from this webinar, and Raisa will be responding them even after the webinar is done and dusted with. So Raisa, the floor is yours to have a closing remark.
I would just say that it's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you, to be honest, because like you said that the pandemic has, or quarantine in general, has basically reduced our one-on-one conversations considerably. So it's nice to be having any form of conversation with anyone, to be honest. So it was just I'm just glad that I was able to have this conversation with you and basically de-stress in general, because like I said that we would often go to MUNs to detox and de-stress in the first place. So this is something which I always look forward to.
Absolutely, you're totally 100% right with what you just mentioned. Let me just confess something just for the viewers. We've had this conversation over and over and over again between myself and Raisa, that I actually registered for an MUN as a delegate where Raisa was supposed to be the editor-in-chief, and somehow I was allocated in the International Press Committee. We don't need to mention the name of the conference, but for some reason, for some unavoidable circumstances, Raisa had to back out, and someone else had to take over. So that's not the story. The story is a year or couple year later to that experience, we were both invited to serve as fellow Dias members, and till today I regret the fact that I could not be a delegate under Raisa Ashraf. So I did register, I did my part. For some reason, Raisa pulled off, but that's part of life. So anyways, Raisa, I will be waiting for things to get better so that I can experience and taste your Turkish cookings and other delicacies that you are practicing at home. So thank you so much. Yeah, Medha knows the name. That's true. By the way, Medha is one of those who are prominent faces in the international press in the Bangladesh arena. So thank you all for tuning in. Do check the A Foundation pages for the next webinar. We have a few other guests coming up, and as we move forward, this is webinar 6, as we move closer to perhaps webinar 20 or webinar 30, I am sure you wouldn't want to miss out, just like today. You joined in and listened to Raisa Ashraf talking about the rules of procedure of international press in model event. Raisa, take care, stay safe. Please stay in the background, do not leave. I'll come back to you right after this outro. So take care.
You too.
So thank you, Raisa. So viewers, thank you for joining in. Please do comment, and do remember that we have a Model UN conference coming up, and we will definitely talk about it some other day, not today definitely, because our focus is on sharing knowledge, and that's all. This is Ahmed Kabir Shayan signing out. Thank you for joining in. Take care. Bye-bye.